Hello and welcome to Labor Talks. I am your host, Laurie Gruber. Today's special guest is Reverend Sandra McKinney. Sandra currently serves on the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors.
Yes.
Welcome to Labor Talks.
Thank you, Laurie.
Welcome back to Labor Talks.
It's great to be with you again.
We hope that we have lots of new viewers. Can you tell them a little bit about you?
Sure. I really have quite an eclectic background. I like to call it that. Having worked both in the profit world and the nonprofit world, some experience in working in the addiction field in the 70s and 80s and marketing and research before I started looking at a career in ministry. So several careers, and I like to say maybe I've had 5 lifetimes.
It's kind of nice that you have that kind of a background.
It does. I think it adds to those experiences, and working in different fields kind of gives you a different perspective when you're looking at issues that are coming up for the county, especially in your community, and pulling from all of that experience.
Helps you understand both sides.
Yes, hopefully.
Now, you're currently serve for District 2.
Correct.
Can you tell us where District 2 is?
Yes. If you, probably everyone's heard recently of the Cannery District. That would be a good way to explain the one of the borders along the river just behind where Family Video was, the Eau Claire Children's Theater, the new brewing project, which we're really proud of. So that's one boundary. Vine Street, although there is a little bit that juts over towards Cameron in the lower part of the district, all the way up to 14th Street, and then on the north side over to Folsom Street. So it's really shaped like a square, and my home actually sits exactly in the middle of that square.
And what issues do you feel are currently most important for the county board to address, especially when it comes to District 2?
I think, some of the issues that really have taken precedence this past year, the poverty level in our community, the housing issue, those are issues that are really raised to the forefront and especially prevalent in the district that I'm in. It's an older district with little bungalows, so I know as I'm talking to people at doors, it's either an older population or young couples just starting out. So I see also the impact that addiction has had on this community. And so bringing that experience from having worked in that field in the past has really been helpful for me to understand the need for us to be addressing that in new and innovative ways.
Well, and you mentioned too the young couples that are just starting out. I know there's a lot of what we would consider starter homes in that area, but that also then turns around turnover, because now when they get on their feet and get a little bit more along, they're going to put that house back on the market and go look for a bigger, better house, and it may not be in that district. So I think that's one of the reasons why that poverty seems to stay. Right,
and then you look at a level of people in that district who are aging, which includes myself. And I had to sell my home this past year. I could afford the mortgage, but couldn't afford upkeep. And that's, I think, what's happened. I was fortunate to sell my home to someone who wanted to be a landlord.
Oh, nice.
So I didn't have to move.
So you didn't have to move.
Got it all cleaned up and decluttered.
Best of both worlds.
Preparing for sale. And so I'm very grateful to that young man who came along and a contractor who wanted the experience of becoming a landlord. So we're working together, and I'm very grateful for him and how that all evolved.
Well, and I know that's one of the other things that the county chair and I was discussing last week, is that the landlords in our area need to, and some of them, not all of them, need to step up.
Yes.
Because anytime you go to a college town, there always tends to be an area that I always called the college slumlords, where they'd cram 11 kids in one house. That's not a good environment in any way, shape, or form. There's no privacy. It leads to a lot of other things, and the houses are not kept up.
Right. Yes. I know that's an issue.
So it's nice to know that you have one that actually is interested in it.
I have one, and he also talked to me at the time he was looking and considering the purchase, his partner, who has several rental properties, and that encouraged him. I just think they're great landlords, and they are responsible, and they are keeping up the properties that they own.
Do you know if the county ordinances have been updated for new building materials?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
We put a new roof on our house, one of
Okay.
those metal, not the
Right.
corrugated steel,
Right.
the ones that look like shingles, they look almost like ceramic shingles, which adds a lot of value to your home. Unfortunately, where I live, the ordinances hadn't been updated so that those were not an approved material.
Okay.
So that was one of the things we had to do, is we had to go and change the ordinances. But then we also had a building inspector from another area who lived in our town, because I live in a bedroom community, and he came back and suggested an ordinance to up that all the buildings in town, especially rentals, had to be to a certain standard, or the village or county could come in and say,
Okay.
you need to fix this by this much time, or this is
Okay.
what's going to happen. Because those are attractive nuisances when there's a building that's ready to fall down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know some of that would come under city, and I know that the city county, we're trying to have more and more ways that we're working together.
Instead of doing this.
Right. I feel fortunate that the city council representative, whose area overlaps mine, because hers is much bigger, on the city council, we've been working together since she was elected.
And who's that?
That's Jill Christofferson.
Okay.
And we were really part of the beginnings of the neighborhood association for the Upper West Side. And so the more that we can work together and in neighborhoods, I think that will bring more and more power to the community and voices being heard.
And it's always nice to see the collaboration between.
Yes. Yeah, I really
the city
like
is
that.
within the county, so they
Right.
should work together.
Right.
Now, you're currently the president of Jonah.
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us about that organization?
Yes, I love to talk about Jonah. Jonah came to town 13 years ago, and it's an organization that started in Milwaukee in the overall state organization is Wisdom. There's 11 affiliates, and Jonah is one of those. And when they came to town, they really focus on faith communities in their membership.
Okay.
And so that's how they came to interact with me, is because of my serving at the time as a minister at Unity. At the same time, the larger Unity movement, which is located in Kansas City, was saying we need to be doing social justice work and looking at what are issues in your community that aren't being addressed. And so for those two things to come together at the same time, it was like, okay, I don't need a 2x4. It's like, okay, I think this is something we might want to get involved in. And as a clergy, you put it out to your community, the congregation, and because it really takes the strength of both the leader and the congregation to want to make it happen. And I found there was about 10 to 20% of the membership who really cared about seeing that come together for our community. And I watched over time the deepening spiritually of those people. So to me, Jonah, and I now 13 years later and still involved, I just really see it an incredible asset for this community and the members who are involved.
For those who don't know, can you tell us what Jonah stands for?
Jonah is Joining Our Neighbors Advancing Hope, which really supports the development of neighborhood associations. If we don't know our neighbors,
No.
That may be part of some of our community problems.
Well,
right
and a
now.
lot of what, like you said, getting these people involved makes them more committed. So then they see what they've done to help.
Right.
Now they want more of it. It gives you a good feeling.
Yes. Yes.
But to me, it's a big about. There's a lot of people out there who believe that they cannot ever advance beyond where they grew up, or get out of that circle, get out of that cycle of, my dad and mom never had any money, so I'm never going to have any money.
Sure.
I'm not worth anything.
Right.
I'm not going to get educated. How do we go about explaining to them or encouraging them to look beyond that mindset?
Well, Jonah believes in the power of relationship and building relationship one-on-one and being a good listener, so that from that experience, we really learn our sameness, rather our differences. And, the task forces that we've been involved in since Jonah's inception include changes to the incarceration, which again is focused on the addiction issue. This past year, homelessness was one of our big areas that we spent a lot of time with. Immigration, this is a community with a lot of people from the Hmong. We're now growing in our Spanish-speaking communities, and we believe in the power of embracing everyone, no matter what their background or nationality or race or gender. And when we can do that as a community, we're going to strengthen our community.
So that I really think that our country's gone back 100 years in racial discrimination and hate. Yeah. And to see a community that will do the outreach, which like what Jonah does and which the Unity Church does, to get away from that, bring it back.
Right.
I mean, like you said, there is a big population of Hmong here.
Yes.
And Spanish. And where I live, we do a mass once a month in Spanish.
Oh, great.
We need to include them and not make them feel that they don't belong.
Right. Oh, good for you.
So I'd love to see us do some services, some events in Hmong. And do we have a Hmong community center? I know La Crosse does. Do we have one here?
The university has functions where they recognize the Hmong New Year, and I'm sure there's other things throughout the year that community
I'll have to look in it more because
gathers.
With my job for the insurance company, one of the unions that I work with is half Hmong.
Oh, okay.
So when we provided benefits to them, we provided their letters to them in Hmong or in English.
Oh, sure.
The Hmong written language is lost.
Right.
It's really a lost art. There's very few people. They just get their kids to come in and translate for them, or their grandkids. But it was nice to be able to do that so that they knew we cared about them too.
Right.
So you also act as a marriage officiant, right?
I do.
Do you see the trend moving more to non-traditional services for marriages?
I began officiating for weddings when I first started serving at Unity in 2003, and just really loved them and loved working with couples. And even back then, 18 years ago, there was more and more young people not churched. And yet, if they were looking for someone who was ordained to officiate for their service, that told me something, that they wanted that element of depth to their service and creating the service. So it's not something recent. It's been going on for quite a while.
I've been to a lot of weddings where it's just been a justice of peace or someone who's done the internet course. And we have friends that are getting married this year, and they came and asked my husband, because they said he's the most religious person they know, if he would take the course so that he could officiate. While being honored that they asked him that, he said, I don't want that responsibility because I'm not ordained. He says, I believe that should be more of a church type thing than just someone taking a course.
Wisconsin changed the state law about 4 years ago, because prior to that, you did need to be ordained with a community. The only one exempt was Quakers because they don't have official leaders. And the fact that the state then changed that law then made it more accessible for people to get, Uncle Joe, friend Tom. I am still once in a while hear, oh, don't you have to be a man to officiate? I do still hear that. And then another element of young folks getting married is they all want to get married outdoors. Now, I recognize that passion, and I always start those ceremonies with, we're in God's sanctuary. It's not in four walls, it's really everywhere. I do believe in the power of prayer, because Unity is founded on prayer. And I always encourage them when we're developing their ceremony to think about parents and grandparents. Would it be important for them to them that there's prayer included, and especially if they're not getting married in the church.
I have a niece who got married on a golf course, and I know how my in-laws felt.
Right.
And they're in their 80s, and it's it's that the old belief that you have to come to the walls into the consecrated, sanctified area to get married. And there's so many of them now that I think they think marriage is a throwaway. It's a try. I'll try it. If I don't like it, I'll just change.
Sure.
Instead of being that committed family marriage relationship that we saw when we were little.
Right.
You know, my parents were married 50-some years. My grandparents were married 60-some years when my grandma passed away. You don't see a lot of that anymore.
Right.
And as someone who does the genealogy heritage for my family, all of the broken lines, it's
going to be
sad.
harder and harder to do genealogy in the future.
Very sad to see. And now that you're a retired minister from the Unity Church, how do you see our churches today dealing with the shortage of ministers?
That's certainly true for Unity, but also true for all traditions and all denominations. The thing that encourages me as I watch that happening is if you look at the bestseller list, if you look at TV and movies that are popular, there's a lot of spirituality going on. And so I think it's moved out of the church. We believe in Unity that you grow spiritually in small discussion groups, classes, book groups.
Two or more.
Wherever two or more, right. And so I'm encouraged by that, and encouraged by the fact that work like Jonah, I see more and more people coming into Jonah looking for what they traditionally would have looked for in church, that social justice level of work that really did start in the churches back in the early 1900s.
I think that the churches that you see that are busy, that are packed, are moving with the times.
Yes.
They're not just do it the same way. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right?
Right.
I grew up Roman Catholic. If 60% of the Roman Catholics have fallen away from the church, there's a reason.
Right.
So you got to do something to either bring them back, or they need to find their faith somewhere else rather than not having any faith at all. And like you said, it talked about the bestsellers and the TV shows and movies like God's Not Dead, where the musical band Newsboys is bringing younger people into the faith, and that whole movie where they're if anybody that hasn't
God
seen it,
isn't dead.
Yeah, God's Not Dead. It's an awesome movie with a student explaining and proving to a college philosophy professor that God isn't dead.
Right. Yeah,
it's an awesome movie. But I go around. I go to different churches. I have a niece who's Wisconsin Senate. Another one that's non-denominational. I don't believe someone has to be that one religion to get to heaven.
Right.
Okay. But it's still sad to see that there's such a shortage of people that are going into the clergy and being able to be their shepherds. And that's another labor issue that we have, in that we need to. It's another position we need to fill. What would you say to encourage young people to look at going into?
I do believe that spirituality is something that we probably come to later in life. I know there's some people who are inspired early in their career development to do seminary and move into a field. I think there's value in having lived life and have life experiences and then seek to do spiritual leadership. That's very common in the Unity movement. And so just that, when you think of when you're young, you're still searching, who are you, what do you want to be in life, what are your values versus what are your parents' values that you're living. And so that inner work, really the time for that comes after you've raised families and developed careers. And so I think it's a little bit harder to encourage someone young. I think it's got to be something that's in them to know that that's what they want to explore as far as a career field.
Do you think that the shortage may also have to do with the switch from the baby boomers and our generations, which was more helping each other, versus the me generation, where they don't maybe see that it's beneficial for them to help others? Do you think that might be part of it, or no?
No, I don't see that. I don't want to label anybody that.
I just think there's got to be a way to convince the younger people, or people that have, maybe they've lost a job and, like you said, have been helping. They know what it makes them feel like to help that person to go back into don't be afraid to look for that occupation.
I'll share a little bit of a relationship I had just is developing with a young man, 40. To me, that's young.
To me too.
Who's really exploring a new field in his life, and having come from some pretty negative experiences, and yet being able to use those experiences now as passion that's going to move him forward into doing what I see is probably some great work. And so I think we all kind of reach back into our past and those experiences we've had, because they've really shaped who we are. And then we get to a point where we say, is this really who I am? That deeper exploration.
Can help them empathize more with the people they're going to hopefully be helping.
Right.
Help them not to make the same mistakes.
Right. Correct.
That we've made. On the county board, do you currently serve on any committees?
I do. I serve on 3 committees. When my first 2 terms, I was unopposed. I had the experience of having run for city council and losing. That had to go to a recount. That was the first in history, lost by 7 votes. But when they came the next year and asked me if I would run again, I said, no, I wouldn't run against the people who had supported me in that run, because it was an at-large seat. And they said, well, there is an open seat on the county board, and it's your district, and there's no opponent. I said, I could do that. And so I've had 2 terms where I didn't have an opponent. And when you first serving, they give you a questionnaire to indicate what areas of interest you have. Well, mine were human services because of having worked in the addiction field, judiciary and law because of having worked in the 1970s on a pilot project for drinking and drivers, and then I was really starting to have an interest in ageism as I aged, and recognizing some of the issues that face us as we're older. So I put down ADRC, which is Aging Disability Resource Center. Well, they actually gave me all 3 of those committees.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm so grateful for that, because I've learned so much more, and I've learned how those 3 committees, the issues they have within our community, if not regionally and statewide and nationally. And so I'm really grateful for those 3 committees.
And with the Human Resources, or the Human Services Committee.
Yeah, Department of Human Services.
I know that's a state-funded, not state-funded, state-mandated program that's not, it's underfunded.
Underfunded. And the mandates come from both state and federal government. And we certainly have seen addiction impacting that work, impacting the number of people that are coming through the Department of Human Services. And so when I was 4 years ago, when I was first on that committee, I was questioning why I wasn't hearing anything about prevention. Well, if you're just keeping up daily with what's happening, you don't have time or money to look at prevention. And so that we would continue to repeat a cycle generation after generation. It would just keep getting worse, not better.
Well, and I've noticed that isn't just, and meth is bad, but where heroin was hitting the southern part of Wisconsin, now it's up here as well. Not so much coke, but fentanyl. I've seen a lot of fentanyl overdoses.
But underlying all of that, a drug's a drug, a drug.
Yeah. And we still have the alcohol problems. And
it's about addiction, which is an illness. I think I'm fortunate because I have experience with 45 years of sobriety. I'll be 46 in June.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Having went through that experience myself, going through treatment, and then living a life addiction-free for these years. I was fortunate, and I didn't have to go to treatment more than once. That's rare, and I feel really blessed by that. But I did the work that I needed to do I think my Unity involvement, because I was sober a year, my sponsor said it's time to go to church.
Faith.
And it was to Unity. So the combination of the 12-step program and the Unity has really been very blessing to me and helped me stay on my path.
And knowing that the Human Services is underfunded, do we have enough clinics or places that are helping people with addiction?
No,
here?
we're hearing that now on the news, because if you also look at addiction issues underlying many of those situations is mental illness, and that's where we really have absolutely a lack of services in this community, if not everywhere.
I think a lot of times people have a stigma, or they feel that there's a stigma attached to their family member if that family member has tried to commit suicide or anything like that, rather than looking at the fact that it's a chemical imbalance. There's a reason that they're sick. And sometimes it just comes totally out of the blue.
I think until more and more people are willing to speak out and speak up who have been through the experiences. In the 1950s, many of the celebrities who were dealing with addiction were very open and public about it, and I think that was very helpful. Hopefully we're moving back towards that to be an example, to live a happy, healthy, addiction-free life, which certainly I've been able to get to, which I'm very grateful for. And I know it's through the grace of God and the many people who've been there to support me.
And it's also nice to know that there are role models in the community that someone can come to talk to. When you know the kids are looking up to the football stars and the basketball stars, and then you find out one of them is doing drugs, or one of them killed their spouse or whatever. And there's something behind that too, obviously, for them to do that. They need that positive place to come and look, and to try to change the children of today's kids to look in different places for your role model. I think is important too. The treatment courts obviously are important.
Very important.
We don't want to fill our jails up with kids who have pot or drug exposure, when over there's the person who's the hardcore criminal. Now this poor kid comes out of prison just like that guy. And the restorative justice too, to teach them when they're there, and so they're not repeating that cycle. Institutionalization. You're currently up for re-election. Is there anything that you would like to say to the voters in District 2 to make sure that they come out that day?
Okay. I just think it's so important that we vote. I certainly would appreciate everyone's vote on April 7th, and look forward to continue serving the District 2 of Eau Claire on the county board, and promise to be a good listener and to carry your concerns to the county level. Thank you.
When, as we move forward after the election, when you get reelected, is there any particular issue that you really want to stress going into this next session?
I'm going to address something. I may even address it before the campaign. I'm a little concerned with how the media has presented recently information around the vehicle registration fee. There's a lot of disinformation on there, and it gets perpetuated on social media. And so I think I'm going to write an article about it. I do like to write. Done a couple articles for aging and disability. And, the misinformation is just as bad as not addressing an issue, if not worse. And, the most emails I've ever received as a member of the county board was on the vehicle registration fee.
It's like, why do we have to pay it? Where's the money going to go?
Right. And there's this misunderstanding that this would apply to city streets. It does not. It's only county roads. Having owned and driven a hybrid for over 12 years now as a way to help the environment, my registration fee was doubled. I don't hear anyone complaining about that.
So then we'll watch for that article.
I'll watch. You watch for it?
Yeah, because we have that in our county too, so it'd be a nice way to be able to explain to people.
Yeah, I think for people to understand before they're, get all the facts before you put out your opinion, because just like nationally, I think we can perpetuate untruths, then they become part of the problem. But yes, vote on April 7th.
That's our program. We actually run out of time. My thanks to the viewing audience and to Reverend McKinney, who made the program possible. My also thanks to the people behind the cameras here at Valley Media Works, who give us a outlet for our worker family voices. And you can see the show twice weekly on channel 993, and also use your search engine on YouTube for Labor Talks, and you'll find it. Thanks for viewing.